Hey guys, it's Rob. So I just wanted to show you guys another build that I've been playing around with a little bit here and there lately. It is a Rend and Hammer of the Ancients kind of hybrid mix build. I took a few aspects from the typical Hammer of the Ancients build and a typical Rend build that people usually run with, and I kind of mixed them together and tried to make it work, and I think it did pretty well. So in this video I'm going to show you guys the skills that I use with this build and the runes that I use, and I'm going to explain why I use the skills and the runes that I'm using.
We just caught one of those devastators alone.
Alright, so my first skill that I'm using is Bash. It is a single target attack that hits for 165% weapon damage with 20% chance of knockback. I'm still using the Pulverized Rune, which... I'm using the Pulverized Rune that does 38% weapon damage to enemies in a 26-yard line behind the initial enemy that you're hitting. The reason I use this Rune with this skill is because it gives you a little bit of AoE damage to a single target attack, because most of this build is, for the most part, single target damage. So this gives you a little more multiple target damage, which I think is nice, because beating things down one enemy at a time can kind of get repetitive, and then I think this speeds it up a little bit and just adds a little bit more area of effect damage in a straight line behind your enemy, of course. Then the second skill I'm using is, of course, the Hammer of the Ancients. It hits for 325% weapon damage on an enemy in front of you, a single enemy in front of you. And Hammer of the Ancients has a 1% increased critical hit chance for every 5 Fury that you have. So the more Fury you have, the more chance you have to crit with this skill. The rune I'm using with this is the Thunderstrike rune. Whenever you kill an enemy with this skill, every enemy in 10 yards is stunned for 3 seconds. This is nice for survivability reasons. It just takes more damage off of you and gives you more time to burn them down while they're not attacking you. I mean, it just helps you stay alive. There's no reason not to use that. I think this works really well. As you kill one enemy with it, everything else around that will not be hitting you for at least a few seconds, and you'll have more time to burn another enemy down with the same skill and keep mostly everything around you stunned. The next skill I'm using is a pure defensive skill. It's Ignore Pain. Now you may or may not want to use this depending on your gear level or whatnot. This reduces all damage taken by 65% for 5 seconds, and I'm using the Ironhide rune, which increases it to 7 seconds. This is a really good oh shit button if you think you're going to die. It's very straightforward. It's really nice to have in tough situations, especially at higher MP levels. The next skill I'm using is also a defensive skill. It is Leap. It does exactly what it sounds like. You jump into the air, doing 85% weapon damage to all enemies within 8 yards of your destination, and slowing their movement speed by 60%. I am using the Iron Impact rune, which makes you gain 100% additional armor per enemy hit for 3 seconds after you hit the ground. So you just get increased armor for every enemy you hit after you leap. That's really nice to jump into a huge group of things, and it just helps with survivability, keeps you alive longer. If you hit a lot of enemies, your armor is going to go through the roof. Make you almost unkillable if you hit enough enemies. Now, my next skill is the Rend ability. This is the other main skill that I like to mix in with the Hammer of the Ancients builds. It's an AoE effect damage that does 700% weapon damage over 5 seconds. It basically just puts a dot on them, does 700% of your weapon damage over 5 seconds. And I use the Bloodlust Rune that makes you gain 9% of that damage done as life. When you're talking about 700% weapon damage, 9% of your damage is a lot of health. As long as you have this up on a couple of enemies, you're probably not going to drop. This is a very, very powerful skill to use. This, in combination with the Hammer of the Ancients, you're going to be putting out a lot of damage in a short period of time. The next skill that I like to use is the Wrath of the Berserker, the big cooldown skill of this build. It's basically just a huge DPS increase skill. Increases your crit chance by 10%, attack speed 25%, dodge chance 20%, movement speed 20%. It increases not only your DPS and how much damage you're putting out, but it's also really good for survivability as well. And it increases your movement speed and your dodge on top of it. The rune that I like to use with this is the Thrive on Chaos. For every 25 Fury you gain, it adds 1 second to the duration of this spell, or skill rather. And hypothetically, if you are putting out enough If you are pulling in enough fury and generating enough fury, you can keep this skill going for a very long time. Some people with certain levels of gear can actually keep their Wrath of the Berserker up forever. I mean, as long as they have enemies to hit, of course. Now, moving on to the passive skills that I'm using. The first one I like to use, this is very debatable. I know a lot of people don't like to use this, but I find this one very useful. It's Animosity. It increases your fury generation by 20%, and your maximum fury is increased by 20. The reason I like to use this is because I am not using the Battle Rage skill, which the Battle Rage is really good for fury generation. This kind of helps with not having that. This will make sure you do have a significant amount of fury, and this will be what actually will help you considerably keeping up your Wrath of Berserker. This one is probably interchangeable with a couple others. This is just the one I prefer to use. I think 20% is a pretty significant increase to my fury generation, but that's up to you to decide. There's a couple others you could just change that out with, but this is the one I'm going with right now. The next one is Ruthless. It increases your crit hit chance by 5% and crit hit damage by 50%. That is a large chunk of DPS. That's just going to make you crit more often and crit even harder. That is an all-around awesome skill to use. I mean, if you don't need any more survivability skills, this is one of the ones you need to go with. And the third and final, but definitely not the least, of the skills I'm using is the Weapons Master. It increases certain stats depending on what kind of weapon you're using in your main hand. Now, I'm obviously using a two-handed Scorn, so I'm benefiting from the maces / axe category, which is 10% increased crit hit chance. And swords, 15% increased damage, polearms and spears, 10% attack speed, mighty weapons, 3 fury. Now, I personally just prefer to use axes and maces just for this. The 10% extra crit hit chance is really nice, because with this build, you're going to be critting for large amounts of damage. With my gear right now, I'm critting from anywhere from 700k to 1.4 million. I know some people do less, some people do a hell of a lot more. But this build kind of relies on your crit damage and your crit chance. You're going to be burning down elites in no time with how high of hits. Here, let me catch up with myself. How high your crits are going to be. You're just going to be burning the elites down like it's nothing.
When virtue tarries, evil smites.
Now, one thing about this build though is if you do not use the passive skill that gets you life regen, which that's one of the interchangeable ones. You want to make sure that your belt has around roughly 3% damage life steal. I mean, damage dealt converted to life. Because at about this point, if you're doing 100k DPS or more, 3% life steal is going to be a pretty significant life regen. Anything beyond the 3%, like any life steal that you may have on a weapon, is nice. It's just going to increase your survivability that much more. Or any life steal you can get from any other skills or life on hit even. But at higher DPS, obviously, you're going to want to go with life steal because it's the percentage of out of your damage. It's just going to be a lot higher than life on hit. Now, with this build, I don't suggest this for farming, like speed farming, like doing lower monster power levels, like the Alkaiser run that I put in one of my last videos. This is more of a single target like boss build, a DPS boss build. I highly suggest this for higher MPs. This it has a little more survivability when you're dealing with more damage intake and you're putting out more single target damage than, like, let's say a Whirlwind spec. Whirlwind is still, in my opinion, a far superior build for speed farming and experience farming when you're doing lower MPs. I mean, you can do moderately higher MPs with Whirlwind as well, but I just believe this is probably more effective around MP 8 or 9. You're going to be able to put that higher damage out and you'll have really high survivability with this build, but your movement speed and your farming speed is going to be drastically reduced with this as opposed to a Whirlwind build. I still personally, for entertainment value, I prefer the Whirlwind build over this, but when you're getting to higher MPs or you're doing higher MP Uber bosses, this probably would be a better choice DPS wise. At least I believe so. That's just my opinion, but who am I, right? Anyways, I think that pretty much sums up this video. Before you go, though, I would like you to go ahead and check out my Facebook. I'm going to put a link to my YouTube-related Facebook in the description below, and I might put a link in the video. I don't know about that. I'll have to decide about that later. Anyways, if you like this build, or if you like my videos, give me a comment, a like, or even if you really like it, subscribe. Subscribe used to be up at the top. I believe it's down at the bottom with all these YouTube changes lately. If you really like it, give me a subscribe, leave me a comment, leave me a like, anything, share the video. I believe that is about it. Thank you for watching the video. Have a great day.